October in Detroit does not ask for permission, it just takes. The wind at Mount Olivet Cemetery felt personal that morning. It felt like a blade made of ice that was trying to carve the skin right off my bones. I stood there in my black suit. It was the only good suit I owned. I bought it 5 years ago for a wedding, and now I was wearing it to bury my wife. The wind whipped the fabric against my legs and stung my eyes, but I did not blink. I could not blink. If I closed my eyes, I knew I would see her face the way it looked in the morgue. Pale, cold, absent. The sky was a flat sheet of gray steel. It looked heavy enough to crush us all. Beneath it, the priest was saying words about peace and eternal rest. He spoke about God having a plan. I wanted to walk over and punch him in the mouth. What kind of plan includes a 38-year-old woman slamming into a telephone pole at 50 miles per hour? What kind of plan leaves a man alone in a house full of half-finished projects and silence? But I did not move. I stood still. I was a statue made of grief and anger. My father always told me that a man is a fortress. Walter Hill. Everyone called him Pops. He was standing to my right. He looked like a mountain carved out of granite. He was 68 years old, but he stood straighter than men half his age. He wore a long wool coat and a fedora that hid his eyes. He did not touch me. He did not offer a hug. That was not his way. His presence was the only comfort he offered. He taught me that black men do not crumble, not in public, not when the world is watching. You stay hard, you stay ready. You swallow the pain until it turns into a stone in your gut and you carry it. That is the job. So I stood there and I did not cry. The tears sat behind my eyes like a dam that refused to break. Around me, people were weeping. My Auntie May was making that high, thin sound that sounds like a wounded animal. My cousins were dabbing their eyes with tissues. But I felt nothing but a terrible and vast emptiness. It was a numbness that started in my fingertips and spread all the way to the center of my chest. I felt like my soul had been scooped out with a spoon, leaving only a shell behind. The hydraulic lift made a low, mechanical hum. It was an ugly sound, industrial, cold. It sounded like the machinery in the auto plants where my grandfather used to work. I watched the casket lower into the ground. It was mahogany. It had silver handles and a finish so deep you could see your reflection in it. It was beautiful. It was the most expensive thing I had ever bought in my life. The memory of buying it hit me then. It pulled me away from the grave and back to the office of the funeral director 3 days ago. I remembered the smell of that office. It smelled of lilies and floor wax and old money. Henderson sat across from me behind a desk that looked like it cost more than my annual salary as a teacher. He had soft hands, hands that never held a wrench or a basketball. He had a voice like warm syrup. He slid the invoice across the mahogany desk toward me. $18,500. I looked at the number. It danced in front of my eyes. $18,500 for a casket and a service and a plot of land. It was robbery. It was extortion. But it was necessary. This was a home-going service. In our community, you do not send your loved ones away cheap. You send them home with dignity. You send them home with glory. I pushed the paper back toward him. I tried to keep my voice steady. I told him to bill the life insurance policy. We had a policy with Prudential. Alicia and I took it out 10 years ago when we first got married. We paid the premiums every month. It was automatic. It was safe. Mr. Henderson looked at me. He had a look in his eyes that I hated. It was pity. It was the look a rich man gives a beggar. He tapped a folder on his desk. He told me he had already checked. He told me the policy was terminated. I felt the blood drain from my face. I asked him what he meant. He said the policy lapsed 6 months ago due to non-payment. The room seemed to tilt. 6 months ago. That was impossible. Alicia handled the bills. She was a realtor. She lived by calendars and schedules and closing dates. She was the organized one. I was the one who forgot where I put my keys. She never missed a payment, not ever. But Mr. Henderson showed me the printout. Policy terminated, April 15th. I sat there in that plush leather chair, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. Why would she stop paying? We were not rich, but we were not drowning. We had money for bills. Where did the money go? But I could not ask those questions then. I could not let this man with the soft hands see me panic. I could not let him think I was broke. I could not let him think I could not provide for my wife even in death. My pride rose up in my throat like bile. I thought of my father. I thought of the lesson, stay hard. I told him I would pay cash. I walked out of there and I went to the bank. I emptied our savings account. Every dime we had saved for our 20th anniversary trip to Italy. It was $12,000. It was not enough. I had to sell my truck. I sold my Ford F-150 to my Uncle Gus. He gave me $4,000 for it. It was worth $8,000. He knew he was robbing me, but he said he was doing me a favor because he had cash on hand. I took it. I had to. I even pawned the Rolex my grandfather left me, the one he wore for 40 years at the Ford plant. The man at the pawn shop gave me $2,500. I felt like Judas selling his soul for silver. But I got the money. I paid Mr. Henderson. I bought the mahogany casket. I bought the flowers. I bought the dignity my wife deserved. Now I watched that $18,500 box disappear into the dark earth. The wind howled again. It brought me back to the present. The numbness was still there, but now it was mixed with fear. I was broke. I was alone. And my wife had been keeping secrets. Why did she cancel the insurance? What was happening in our life that I did not see? I looked to my left. My brother Byron stood there. He was checking his watch. It was a gold watch. Expensive. He probably had a client meeting to get to. He was an architect. He was successful. He had the twin sons I could never have. He had the life I was supposed to have. He caught me looking at him and he gave me a stiff nod. His eyes were dry. I looked back at the grave. The workers were starting to shovel dirt. The sound of the dirt hitting the wood was like a drum beat. Thud, thud, thud. Goodbye, Alicia. I whispered it, but the wind tore the words away before anyone else could hear. I adjusted my coat. I squared my shoulders. I checked my face to make sure it was a mask of stone. The funeral was over. The guests were starting to move toward their cars. They would go to my house for the repast. They would eat potato salad and fried chicken and talk about how tragic it was. They would look at me with sad eyes, but they did not know the truth. They did not know I was standing on the edge of a cliff. They did not know that the man in the black suit was already dead inside. The last prayer ended. The priest closed his leather-bound Bible with a soft thump that sounded too final in the cold air. It was time for the roses. One by one, the mourners approached the rectangular hole in the earth. They dropped white roses onto the polished mahogany casket. The flowers fell in a chaotic heap. They looked like splashes of milk against dark wood. I watched them fall. Each one represented a memory or a regret or a lie. I wondered which ones were genuine. The crowd began to disperse. They moved like a dark river flowing toward the parking lot where the heaters in their cars awaited. They huddled in groups and spoke in hushed tones about lunch arrangements and traffic routes. They were already moving on. For them, this was a Tuesday morning interruption. For me, it was the end of the world. But not everyone left. Kendra remained. Alicia's younger sister stood apart from the main group near the trunk of a massive oak tree. She had been standing there for the entire service. She wore a black dress that was too tight and heels that were too high for the soft cemetery grass. A pair of oversized sunglasses covered half her face even though the sun had not shown itself all day. She looked like a celebrity hiding from the paparazzi, or perhaps she was just hiding the fact that she had not shed a single tear. She waited until the priest walked away. She waited until my Auntie May was helped into a sedan by two cousins. Then she moved. She walked toward me with a precise and predatory grace. Her heels sank slightly into the earth with each step, but she did not stumble. She cut through the cold wind like a knife. As she got closer, I could smell her. It was a sharp mix of expensive designer perfume and the stale scent of menthol cigarettes. It was the smell of nervousness masked by money. She stopped right beside me. She was close enough that her shoulder brushed against the sleeve of my cheap suit. She did not look at the grave. She looked at me. Behind those dark lenses, I knew her eyes were cold. She had always tolerated me at best. To her, I was the boring teacher who talked about history and budgets. I was the man who held her vibrant sister back. I was the anchor that kept Alicia from soaring. She leaned in. Her lips were painted a dark crimson. "She was leaving you anyway," Kendra whispered. The words hung in the air between us. They were suspended there like smoke. I blinked. I thought perhaps the wind had played a trick on my ears. I turned to look at her, but she did not pull away. She leaned closer. "Did you hear me, Dante?" she hissed. Her voice was low and steady. It was not the voice of grief. It was the voice of execution. She was done. She was filing the papers next month. She was leaving you for Malik. Malik. The name hit me with the force of a physical blow to the stomach. The air left my lungs in a rush. My mind scrambled to reject the information, but the name was too specific. It was too real. Malik. I knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. He was the personal trainer at the gym where Alicia had been going 4 times a week for the last year. He was 28 years old. He had skin the color of polished bronze and dreadlocks that he tied back in a neat bundle. He had perfect teeth and a body that looked like it was carved out of obsession and protein shakes. He was everything I was not. She deserved better than you, Kendra said. She twisted the knife. She deserved passion. She deserved a man who was actually alive, not a history teacher who was already half dead. Malik made her feel things you stopped making her feel 10 years ago. She pulled back then. She adjusted her sunglasses. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. I thought you should know, she said. Stop playing the grieving widower. You are just the husband she did not get around to divorcing yet. She turned on her heel and walked away. She did not look back. She tossed her single white rose onto the ground near the pile of dirt. She did not even dignify her sister with the gesture of placing it on the casket. She just dropped it like trash and marched toward her car. I stood frozen. The cold wind was nothing compared to the chill that was spreading through my veins now. A normal man might have shouted. A normal man might have chased after her and demanded proof. A normal man might have called her a liar, but I did not move. The shock did not result in an explosion. It resulted in an implosion. It was a slow-acting poison that seeped into the cracks of my confidence. Malik. The image of him flooded my mind. I saw him spotting her on the bench press. I saw his hands on her waist to correct her form. I saw them laughing near the juice bar. I had met him once at a gym fundraiser. He had shaken my hand with a grip that was too firm. He had called me sir. At the time I thought it was respect. Now I realized it was mockery. He called me sir because I was old, because I was the past. He was the future. I looked down at my hands. They were the hands of a man who held chalk and graded papers. They were dry. They were tired. I was 38 years old, but I felt like I was 60. I had given Alicia security. I had given her a mortgage and a predictable life. I thought that was what marriage was. But Malik gave her adrenaline. He gave her youth. Was it true? The question gnawed at the base of my skull. Was my entire marriage a lie in its final days? While I was worrying about paying the electric bill, was she dreaming of running away with a man 10 years her junior? I felt a desperate need for an anchor. I needed someone to tell me that Kendra was crazy. I needed someone to tell me that I was a good man and a good husband. I slowly turned my head to the right. My father was still standing there. Walter Hill, the great protector. He was watching the workers begin to fill the grave. His face was devoid of emotion. He looked like he was supervising a construction project. He did not look at me. He did not sense my internal collapse. If I told him what Kendra said, he would probably nod and tell me to stand up straight. He would tell me that feelings are for women and children. He would tell me to take it on the chin. There was no comfort in him. There was only concrete. I looked past him to my brother, Byron. Byron was tapping something into his phone. He was probably checking his stock portfolio or texting his mistress. He caught my eye and gave a small, impatient shrug. It was a gesture that said, "Are we done yet?" He did not care. He had his own life. He had his twin sons and his luxury sedan and his beautiful wife who was waiting in the car because it was too cold for her to stand outside. I was completely and utterly alone. The wind howled again. It sounded like laughter now. I looked back at the grave. The mahogany wood was disappearing under the first shovels of dirt. My wife was down there, and according to her sister, she had died belonging to another man. The grief that I had felt 10 minutes ago began to curdle. It began to sour. It was turning into something hot and ugly. It was turning into humiliation. I was the fool. I was the cuckold. I was the man standing in the freezing cold burying a woman who wanted to leave him. I took a breath. The air tasted like metal. "Goodbye," I whispered. But this time it was not a farewell to a lover. It was a question mark. I turned away from the grave. My legs felt heavy. My heart felt like a stone that had been cracked open. I walked toward the parking lot. I walked past my father who did not speak. I walked past my brother who was already opening his car door. I walked toward my empty truck and my empty house and my empty life. Kendra had planted a seed. And in the darkness of my mind, that seed was already beginning to grow roots. The days following the funeral were not filled with healing. They were filled with a silence that felt heavy enough to break floorboards. The house on Maple Street was no longer a home. It was a mausoleum of half-finished dreams and unpaid bills. The potato salad from the repast had turned sour in the refrigerator. The flowers on the dining room table had wilted into brown husks. The sympathy cards stopped coming. The phone stopped ringing. But the creditors did not stop calling. I had paid the funeral director, but the financial crater that transaction left behind was vast. I had drained the savings account. I had maxed out 2 credit cards to cover the catering and the headstone. I was a teacher living on a teacher's salary, and suddenly I was drowning in debt that I had no way to repay. My next paycheck was 2 weeks away, and it was already spent before it even arrived. I sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of red envelopes. The math was simple and cruel. I was insolvent. To bury my wife with dignity, I had to strip myself of my own. First went the truck. My Uncle Gus came over on a Thursday afternoon. The sky was a bruised purple color and the air smelled of impending rain. Gus was my mother's brother, but he had none of her warmth. He was a man who looked at the world and saw only transaction fees. He walked around my Ford F-150 like a vulture circling a dying animal. He kicked the tires. He ran a finger over a small scratch on the bumper. He shook his head as if the vehicle was a burden he was graciously agreeing to take off my hands. I had bought that truck 5 years ago. It was my pride. I kept the engine spotless. I changed the oil every 3,000 miles. It was the one thing in my life that was powerful and reliable. "It has high mileage, Dante," Gus said. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at the hood. "The transmission feels a little sticky. I do not know. The market is soft right now." He was lying. We both knew he was lying. The truck was in perfect condition. It was worth at least $9,000 on the open market. But the open market took time, and I did not have time. I had debt collectors calling my cell phone 3 times a day. $4,000, Gus said. He pulled a thick envelope from his jacket pocket. "Cash, right now." I looked at the envelope. I looked at the truck. I felt a hot spike of shame in my chest. He was family. He knew I was grieving. He knew I was desperate, and he was using that desperation to rob me. "Take it," I said. My voice sounded hollow. I watched him drive away in my truck. He did not look back. I held the envelope in my hand. It felt light. It felt like failure. 2 days later, the house went. I could not afford the mortgage alone, not with the other debts piling up. And truthfully, I could not stand to be in those rooms anymore. Every corner held a memory that felt like a physical assault. The spot on the rug where Alicia used to do yoga, the kitchen island where we argued about paint colors, the empty guest room that was supposed to be a nursery. Gary was a real estate investor. He called himself a flipper, but he was really a shark in a cheap suit. He walked through my house with a clipboard and a sneer. He pointed out the dated cabinets. He complained about the plumbing in the upstairs bathroom. He acted like the house was a teardrop away from condemning. "The market in this neighborhood is tricky," Gary said. He tapped his pen on the clipboard. "I can give you a cash offer. Quick close. You can be out in 7 days. No inspections, no contingencies." He named a price. It was $60,000 below the market value. It was a gut punch. It was theft. But it was an exit. I looked at the walls that Alicia had wanted to paint ocean mist. I looked at the life we had built. It was all just wood and drywall now. "Where do I sign?" I asked. I signed the papers on the kitchen counter. I sold my sanctuary for pennies on the dollar just to stop the bleeding. But the final blow came on Saturday. I still needed money to pay off the final vendor for the headstone. The cash from the truck and the equity from the house were gone as soon as they touched my account, swallowed by the mortgage penalties and the credit card companies. I needed $2,000 more. I went to my dresser. In the top drawer inside a velvet box lay the only thing of real value I had left from my past. It was a gold chain with a heavy crucifix pendant. It was 14-karat gold, solid, heavy. It had belonged to my grandfather, Silas Hill. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the cold metal in my hand. I closed my eyes and I could see him. Silas Hill was a giant of a man. He had worked at the Ford River Rouge complex for 40 years. He worked the assembly line. He came home every day smelling of grease and iron. His hands were calloused so thick they felt like leather gloves. I remembered the day he gave it to me. I was 22 years old. I had just graduated from college. He sat me down on his porch and placed the chain in my hand. "Dante," he had said. His voice was deep like a bass drum. "This is honest gold. I bought this with sweat. I stood on that line for 10 hours a day so this family could have something real. You are a teacher now. You are going to use your mind, not your back. But do not ever forget the value of work. A man pays his own way. A man protects what is his. You never beg. You never steal. You stand on your own 2 feet. Honest gold." I opened my eyes. The room was dim. I was not standing on my own 2 feet. I was crawling. I had failed to protect my wife. I had failed to keep my house. And now I was about to sell his legacy to pay for a hole in the ground. I drove to a pawn shop on 8 Mile Road. The windows were barred. The sign buzzed with a dying neon light. Inside it smelled of stale popcorn and despair. The man behind the counter was named Duke. He had a magnifying loupe in his eye and dirt under his fingernails. He took the chain. He weighed it on a small digital scale. He scratched it against a stone to test the purity. "It is old," Duke said. He tossed it onto the scale like it was scrap metal. "Gold is down this week. I can give you 1,200. "It is worth 3,000, I said. My voice cracked. "It is vintage. It is solid." Duke shrugged. He did not care about history. He did not care about Silas Hill and his 40 years at the Ford plant. He only cared about the melt value. 1,200, he repeated. "Take it or leave it." I looked at the chain one last time. I thought about walking out. I thought about keeping it and letting the debt collectors scream. But the voice of my father Walter echoed in my head. A man handles his business. "I will take it," I whispered. I walked out of that shop with $1,200 in my pocket and a hole in my soul the size of Detroit. I sat in my rental car and stared at the steering wheel. I had sold everything. My truck, my home, my grandfather's sweat. I was stripped bare. I had no assets. I had no wife. I had no dignity left to lose. But as I sat there, a strange thing happened. The sadness began to recede. The tears that had threatened to fall dried up. In the empty space where my grief used to be, a new feeling began to take root. It was hot. It was sharp. It was a low, burning fire in the pit of my stomach. I had played by the rules. I had been the good man. I had been the honest husband and the hardworking teacher. And for what? To be broke. To be alone. To be laughed at by my sister-in-law and robbed by my uncle. Being a good man had gotten me nothing but a cheap suit and a plot of dirt. I started the car. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was done being sad. I was done being the victim. I wanted answers. I wanted to know if Kendra was right. I wanted to know why my life had collapsed so completely. The collapse of my dignity was complete. But from the rubble, something else was starting to rise. Something dangerous. The house on Maple Street was no longer a home. It was a hollow shell that echoed with the sound of my own breathing. I sat on the floor of the living room with a bottle of cheap bourbon between my legs. The furniture was gone. The rug where Alicia used to practice yoga was gone. The paintings of the Detroit skyline that we had bought at Eastern Market were gone. All that remained were the nail holes in the drywall and the dust bunnies dancing in the pale moonlight that streamed through the bare windows. I took a long pull from the bottle. The alcohol burned my throat, but it did not burn away the voice in my head. "She was leaving you anyway." Kendra's whisper was louder than the silence of the house. It bounced off the empty walls. It crawled under my skin. It sat in the center of my chest like a tumor. "She was leaving you for Malik." I looked at the wedding photo I had refused to pack. It was leaning against the baseboard. In the picture, Alicia was smiling. It was that radiant smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. I was standing next to her, looking proud and strong. We looked like a promise that was going to last forever. But now that photo looked like a lie. I stared at her face and I tried to find the deception. I tried to find the secret look in her eyes that said she was bored with me. I tried to find the shadow of Malik in the background. I took another drink. The anger started to rise. It was a hot and ugly thing. It mixed with the grief until I could not tell them apart. I needed to know if it was true. I needed to know if the woman I had just buried was a saint or a stranger. A twisted logic began to form in my alcohol-soaked brain. If she was cheating on me, then her death was not a tragedy. It was karma. If she was a liar, then I did not have to miss her. I could hate her. And hating her would be so much easier than this crushing weight of sorrow. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to find a reason to scrub her memory from my mind. I wanted to find a text message or a hotel receipt or a hidden letter that proved she was trash. I wanted to be the victim of a villain, not the victim of fate. I stood up. The room swayed slightly, but I steadied myself against the wall. I was a man on a mission. I was a detective, investigating the crime scene of my own marriage. I started in the bedroom. The bed was gone, but the built-in closet organizers remained. I tore through them like a madman. I pulled out the drawers that we had emptied days ago, but I checked the undersides. I ran my hands along the shelves, searching for loose floorboards or taped envelopes. I checked the pockets of the few winter coats I had set aside for donation. Nothing. I went to the bathroom. I opened the cabinet under the sink. I threw away the half-used bottles of shampoo and the cleaning supplies. I checked inside the toilet tank. I checked the ventilation fan. I was looking for a burner phone. I was looking for birth control pills that she should not have been taking if we were trying to conceive. I was looking for anything that smelled of Malik. The image of him haunted me. Malik with his dreadlocks and his youth. Malik with his muscles that did not ache when it rained. Did she touch him? Did she look at him the way she used to look at me before the years and the bills and the disappointments wore us down? The thought made me want to vomit. I kicked the bathroom door and the hollow wood cracked. I did not care. The house belonged to the bank and the flipper now. Let them fix it. I moved to the guest room. This was the room we had argued about. Ocean mist or harbor gray. Now the walls were just bare and beige. I walked into the center of the room and spun around. Where would you hide a secret, Alicia? Where would you hide the life you were planning without me? My eyes landed on the closet. The top shelf was high, too high for her to reach without a step stool, but I remembered seeing a sturdy wooden box up there years ago. I had assumed it was old tax returns or holiday decorations. I dragged a chair from the kitchen into the room. I climbed up and felt around the dusty shelf. My fingers brushed against cold plastic. It was not a wooden box, it was a plastic storage bin pushed all the way to the back corner. I pulled it down. It was heavy. I sat on the floor and ripped the lid off. I expected to find love letters. I expected to find photographs of her and Malik on a beach somewhere. I expected to find a brochure for an apartment in downtown Detroit. But there was no Malik in the box. There were needles. Dozens of them. Some were still in their sterile packaging. Some were used and capped in red biohazard containers. There were vials of clear liquid. There were boxes of ovulation tests. There were receipts from a private fertility clinic in Troy that I had never heard of. I picked up a vial. The label read Menopur. I picked up another, Gonal F. These were IVF drugs, serious drugs, expensive drugs. My hands started to shake. I dug deeper into the box. Under the medical supplies were 3 leather-bound notebooks. They were journals. I recognized Alicia's handwriting immediately. It was elegant and sharp. I opened the first one. The date was 2 years ago. Cycle 4 failed, she had written. Dr. Evans says my egg quality is perfect. My uterus is perfect. He does not understand why implantation never happens. I feel like a graveyard. I feel like I am failing Dante every single day. He looks at me with those sad eyes and I know he wants a son. I am broken. I felt the air leave my lungs. She did not think she was leaving me. She thought she was failing me. I flipped through the pages. It was a chronicle of pain. She had documented every injection, every side effect, every crushing disappointment when her period arrived. She had done this alone. She had hidden the bruises on her stomach. She had hidden the mood swings. She had hidden the cost. Then I found the entry dated 8 months ago. The handwriting was different here. It was jagged, angry. Dr. Evans called. He looked at the sample I brought in. He says it is not me. He says it is Dante. He says there is 0 sperm count. 0. A condition called azospermia. But that makes no sense. Dante is healthy. He is strong. Why would he have nothing? I stared at the words, 0 sperm count. I remembered the arguments we had. Alicia would beg me to go to the doctor for a full workup. She would ask me to get tested. And I would refuse. I would get angry. I would tell her that I was a man and that my machinery worked just fine. I told her that the stress was the problem. I told her to relax. I blamed her anxiety. I blamed her job. I blamed the universe. I was the problem. I read the next paragraph. I tried to talk to him again tonight. He shut me down. He said he is a hill man and hill men are fertile. His ego is so fragile. He is so afraid of being less of a man that he would rather let me stick needles in my stomach for 2 years than jerk off into a cup. I love him, but his pride is killing us. The shame washed over me like ice water. It sobered me up instantly. I had let her take the blame. I had let her carry the burden of our infertility because I was too scared to question my own virility. I was the one who was empty. I was the one who was broken. But then the tone of the journal changed. The last few entries were not about sadness. They were about suspicion. I went into the archives she wrote 2 weeks before she died. I found Dante's medical records from when he was a child, the ones his father keeps in the safe at the workshop. The record says appendectomy at age 3. But I showed the surgical notes to a specialist online. He says the procedure description does not match an appendectomy. He says it looks like a vasectomy, a bilateral vasectomy, on a 3-year-old boy. I dropped the journal. The room seemed to spin. A vasectomy at 3 years old. That was impossible. That was madness. Why would anyone sterilize a toddler? I picked up the book again. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely read. Dante does not know, she wrote. Walter did this to him. I do not know why, but I am going to find out. I have to save him. I have to find out why he is empty. If I tell him now, it will destroy him. I need proof. I need the whole truth before I break his heart. She was not meeting Malik for sex. She was meeting people to find out why her husband had been mutilated as a child. She was not leaving me. She was fighting for me. She was fighting a war I did not even know we were in. I closed the journal. I felt sick. I felt a level of self-loathing that was deeper than the ocean. I had stood at her grave and let her sister call me a fool. I had torn apart her house looking for reasons to hate her. And all this time, she had been the only person in the world who truly loved me. She loved me enough to protect me from my own father. My father. Walter Hill. The image of him at the funeral came back to me, standing like a stone statue, unmoved, cold. Had he known? Had he done this? The man who taught me to be a man had stolen my ability to be a father. I needed more. The journal mentioned proof. It mentioned files. But where were they? I looked at the box again. There was nothing else in it. I looked around the empty room. Where would she hide the most dangerous information? Where was the one place she knew I would never look because I was too sentimental or too proud? The jewelry box. I scrambled to my feet. I ran to the master bedroom. The jewelry box was sitting on the floor in the corner where I had left it after removing the necklace to pawn. It was a small wooden box with a pearl inlay. I grabbed it. I dumped the remaining costume jewelry onto the floor. Cheap earrings and plastic bangles scattered across the hardwood. I felt the velvet lining at the bottom of the box. It felt loose. I used my fingernail to pry up the edge of the red fabric. It lifted. Underneath the velvet there was a small cutout in the wood, and nestled in that cutout was a black USB drive. It was small, no bigger than my thumb. Wrapped around it was a piece of yellow masking tape. On the tape in Alicia's careful script were 5 words. If I die before 40. I held the drive in my palm. It felt cold. It felt like a weapon. The house suddenly felt very big and very dark. The silence was no longer empty. It was heavy with threat. I looked at the window. The streetlights outside cast long shadows that looked like fingers reaching for me. Was someone watching? Kendra said Alicia was paranoid. But Alicia was right about the medical records. What else was she right about? I stood up and walked to the kitchen where my laptop was sitting on the counter. I felt like I was moving underwater. Every step was slow and deliberate. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I opened the laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark kitchen. It was the only light in the house. I plugged the USB drive into the port on the side of the computer. The computer chimed. A folder opened on the screen. There was only one file. It was a video file. The timestamp was October 2nd. 3 weeks ago, the day she came home late and told me she had a difficult closing. I hovered my finger over the trackpad. I was afraid. I was terrified. I knew that once I clicked that file, my life would never be the same. The Dante Hill who taught history and worried about his mortgage would cease to exist. I looked around the kitchen one last time. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator. I listened to the wind rattling the window pane. I took a deep breath. I clicked play. The screen went black for a second. Then Alicia's face filled the frame. But it was not the face I knew. Her eyes were wide and darting. Her skin was pale. She looked like a woman who had seen a ghost. She was sitting in this very room. I could see the refrigerator behind her. The fan on my laptop kicked on. It whirred loudly in the silence. It sounded like a helicopter taking off. It sounded like a warning. "Dante," the woman on the screen said. Her voice cracked. It was a sound of pure terror. I leaned in closer to the screen. The blue light illuminated my face. I was alone in the dark with the dead wife I had failed, and she was about to tell me why she had to die. "Dante," she said. Her voice cracked on my name. It was a sound I had never heard before. Alicia was the strongest woman I knew. She was the woman who stared down bank managers and negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking. She was the rock that my entire life was built upon. But the woman on the screen was trembling. Her eyes darted to the side of the camera every few seconds, as if she expected a monster to burst through the door of our guest room. "If you are watching this," she said, "it means they killed me." I stopped breathing. The air in the dark kitchen turned into solid ice. My hand hovered over the keyboard, ready to pause the video, but I could not move. I was paralyzed by the terror in her eyes. "And before you think I'm being dramatic or paranoid," she continued, "please just listen. Please listen to everything I have to say because I do not have much time. I have been followed for 3 days. A black SUV. I saw it outside the office. I saw it outside the gym. They know I found the box." She took a deep breath. She held up a hand to steady herself. I saw that she was not wearing her wedding ring. She must have taken it off to type or to wash her hands, but the sight of her bare finger made my chest ache. "First," she said, "I need you to know about Malik." My stomach twisted. Here it comes. The confession. The apology. I braced myself for the details of her affair. I braced myself to hate her. "I was not sleeping with him, Dante," she said. Her voice was fierce now. "I know what Kendra thinks. I know what everyone thinks. But I was not cheating on you. I would never betray you. I love you more than my own life." Tears spilled from her eyes on the screen, and simultaneously tears spilled from my eyes in the kitchen. "Malik is not just a trainer," she said. "His brother is an assistant United States attorney in Chicago. I approached Malik because I needed legal advice. I needed someone outside of Detroit, someone who could not be bought. I have been meeting with him to hand over documents. We were building a case. We were trying to find a way to get us out of here safely." The shame hit me like a physical blow. It was a sledgehammer to the ribs. I doubled over in my chair. I had torn apart her house. I had sold her jewelry. I had let her sister spit on her memory. And all the while she was meeting with federal prosecutors to save my life. She was not a cheater. She was a soldier. She was fighting a war I was too blind to see. "I was trying to save you," she whispered, "because everything you think you know about your life is a lie." She reached down and picked up a thick manila folder. She opened it and held a document up to the camera. It was grainy, but I could read the header. It was a Department of Justice seal. "Your father," she said, "Walter Hill. He is not a retired mechanic from the Ford plant. He never worked a day on an assembly line in his life." I shook my head. That was impossible. I grew up smelling the grease on his hands. I saw his uniform. I saw his pension checks. "His real name is Roland Davies," Alicia said. "He is a retired United States Marshal. He was the lead handler for the witness security program in Detroit during the 1990s. She dropped the paper and picked up a photograph. It was black and white. It showed a younger Walter Hill standing on the steps of a courthouse. He was wearing a suit and sunglasses. He was not holding a wrench. He was holding a shotgun. Standing next to him were men in FBI windbreakers. "And you," she said. She leaned closer to the lens. Her eyes were full of pity. "Oh, my sweet Dante, you are not his son. You are not a Hill. There is no such thing as the Hill family." The room began to spin. The refrigerator hum sounded like a siren. not his son. "Your birth name is Damon Dubois," she said. The name crashed into my consciousness like a freight train. Dubois. In Detroit, that name meant only one thing: the Dubois Syndicate. They were the black nobility of crime. In the 1980s and 90s, they ran everything from numbers to heroin. They were not street thugs, they were organized, they were brutal, they were kings, and they were slaughtered. The story went that the head of the family, Marcus Dubois, was taken down by the feds in 1988, and his entire family vanished, or was killed in the fallout. "You are the son of Marcus Dubois," Alicia said, "the head of the syndicate. When the feds took your father down, your mother made a deal. She testified against him to save you. She gave you up to the witness protection program. Walter was assigned to be your guardian. He was supposed to place you with a family in Nebraska, but he did not." She flipped a page in the folder. "He kept you," she said. "He and Lorraine kept you. They created a cover identity, the hardworking mechanic and his wife. But it was not out of love, Dante. It was a project. It was an experiment." I felt bile rising in my throat. An experiment. My childhood. My memories of playing catch in the backyard. The fishing trips. The lectures about hard work. It was all a script. It was all a lie, constructed by a federal agent playing house. "He wanted to prove a point," Alicia said. "He wanted to prove that nurture could overcome nature. He wanted to take the son of the most dangerous criminal in Detroit and turn him into a docile sheep. That is why he pushed you to be a teacher. That is why he discouraged you from sports. That is why he was so strict. He was terrified that the Dubois blood would wake up inside you." I looked at my hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. Was this why I always felt a simmering rage beneath my skin? Was this why I had a temper I had to constantly suppress? Was this why I felt like a wolf wearing a wool coat? "But that is not the worst part," Alicia said. She wiped her eyes. Her hand was trembling so bad the paper she held was shaking. "God, Dante, I wish I did not have to tell you this. I wish I could take this to the grave and let you live in ignorance. But you deserve to know why we could not have a baby." I froze. The fertility issues, the needles, the years of failure. "It was not me," she said. "And it was not bad luck. And it was not stress." She held up a medical record. It was old. The paper was yellowed. It had the logo of Cincinnati Children's Hospital at the top. The date was June 12th, 1988. "Do you remember the story about your appendectomy?" she asked. "Walter told us you had a burst appendix when you were 3 years old. That is why you have that scar on your lower abdomen." I nodded at the screen. I knew the scar. It was a jagged white line just above my groin. I had touched it 1,000 times. It was part of my body, part of my history. "It was a lie," she said. "Your appendix is fine. I found the surgical logs. Walter authorized a procedure, but it was not an appendectomy." She took a breath that sounded like a sob. "It was a bilateral vasectomy," she said. The words hung in the air. They defied gravity. They defied logic. Bilateral vasectomy on a 3-year-old boy. "The federal prosecutor demanded it," Alicia explained. "They were terrified of the Dubois bloodline. They said your father was a genetic anomaly, a sociopath. They said his offspring would be a danger to society. They wanted to terminate the bloodline." Walter agreed to it. He signed the consent form. She pointed to a signature on the bottom of the document. "Roland Davies, U.S. Marshal." "He castrated you, Dante," she said. Her voice was full of venom now. "He paid a doctor to mutilate a toddler because he was afraid of who you might become. He stole your children before you were even old enough to read. He stole our family." I let out a sound that was not human. It was a low, guttural growl that came from the deepest part of my stomach. I stood up and ripped my shirt open. Buttons popped and scattered across the kitchen floor. I looked down at my stomach. I traced the scar with my finger. It was not a scar of survival. It was a brand. It was a mark of ownership. I fell to my knees. The pain was physical. I felt a phantom ache in my groin. I felt the emptiness of my future. All those years watching Alicia cry over negative pregnancy tests. All those years feeling like a failure of a man because I could not give her a child. And it was done to me. It was done to me by the man who taught me how to shave, by the man I called Pops. He had looked me in the eye for 35 years and lied. He had watched us suffer. He had watched us spend our life savings on IVF knowing it was impossible. knowing I was shooting blanks because he had cut the cords himself. He did not see me as a son. He saw me as a dog that needed to be neutered. I slammed my fist into the floor. The pain in my hand was grounding. It kept me from passing out. I looked back at the screen. Alicia was still talking. "I know," she said. "I know how much this hurts. I wanted to kill him when I found out. I wanted to burn his house down, but I needed to be smart. I needed to get the original documents. Copies are not enough. The originals are in his workshop, in the metal cabinet he keeps locked, the one he says is full of circuit breakers." The workshop. The forbidden cabinet. Pops always said it was dangerous electrical equipment. "Don't touch that, Dante. You will electrocute yourself." He was not protecting me from electricity. He was protecting himself from prison. "There is one more thing," Alicia said. She looked down at her lap. She seemed hesitant to say the next words. "And this might hurt more than the rest." What could hurt more? My father was a Fed. My identity was a lie. My body was mutilated. What was left to destroy? "Byron," she said, "my brother, my big brother, the architect, the success story. Byron is not your biological brother," she said. "He was another placement, a foster kid from a different system. He does not have the Dubois blood. That is why Walter did not sterilize him. That is why Byron has twins." I felt a flicker of confusion. I always wondered why Byron looked nothing like me, why he was lighter skinned, why his hair was different. We just assumed we took after different sides of the family. "But Byron knows," she said. The world stopped. "He has known since he was 18, Alicia said. "Walter told him. He made Byron part of the secret. He bought Byron's silence. Why do you think Walter paid for Byron's college tuition in full but made you take out student loans? Why do you think Byron got the down payment for his house from Walter, but we got nothing?" She held up a bank transfer record. It showed a transfer of $50,000 from an account linked to Roland Davies to Byron Hill. The date was 10 years ago, the week before my wedding. "It was hush money," she said. "Byron knows who you are. He knows what they did to you. He knows why we could not conceive. And he watched you suffer, Dante. He sat at our dinner table and ate my food and played with our nieces and nephews, and he watched you cry and he said nothing." My vision blurred. Red spots danced in front of my eyes. Byron. Byron who told me to man up when I was depressed about the infertility. Byron who made jokes about my slow swimmers. Byron who held his newborn sons in front of me and said, "Don't worry, little brother, your turn will come." He knew I was empty. He knew I had been robbed, and he took the money. He took the bribe to keep the secret. He sold his brother for an architecture degree and a down payment. The betrayal was absolute. It was total. There was no one left. My father was my jailer. My brother was a traitor. My wife was dead because she tried to free me. "I am going to the workshop tonight," Alicia said on the video. "I am going to try to steal the box. If I get it, I am going to Malik's brother. If I do not..." She paused. She looked directly into the camera. Her eyes were full of tears, but they were also full of love. A fierce, protective love that I did not deserve. "If I do not make it," she said, "you need to finish this, Dante. Do not let them get away with it. You are not a project. You are not a monster. You are a good man. You are my husband, and you deserve the truth." She leaned in and kissed the lens of the camera. "I love you, Dante Hill," she whispered, "or Damon Dubois, or whoever you choose to be. I just love you." The screen went black. The video ended. I sat there in the darkness. The silence of the house was different now. It was not the silence of grief. It was the silence of a bomb right before it detonates. I looked at my reflection in the black screen of the laptop. I saw the tears on my face. But under the tears, I saw something else. I saw the eyes of a stranger. Walter Hill had spent 30 years trying to suppress the Dubois blood. He had cut me, he had lied to me, he had molded me into a gentle pacifist teacher. He thought he had succeeded. But he had made a mistake, a fatal mistake. He had taken everything from me. He had taken my wife. He had taken my children. He had taken my name. And when you take everything from a man, you leave him with nothing to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature on earth. I stood up. I wiped the tears from my face. I did not feel like Dante Hill, the history teacher, anymore. I did not feel like the man who graded papers and followed the rules. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the center of my chest. It was familiar. It was the thing I had been pushing down my whole life. The thing Walter was so afraid of. I walked to the bedroom, I put on my boots, I put on a dark hoodie. I went to the garage and grabbed the crowbar from my tool chest. It was heavy steel. It felt good in my hand. It felt right. I was not going to cry anymore. I was done crying. I walked out of the house and got into the rental car. I put the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I dialed Byron's number. He answered on the second ring. His voice was sleepy. "Dante," he said. "It is midnight, man. What is wrong?" "I need help," I said. My voice was steady. It was calm. It sounded like the voice of a predator. "I am at Pop's workshop. The alarm is going off. I think someone broke in." "I will call Pops," Byron said, his voice instantly alert. "No," I said. "Do not wake him up. He is old. His heart cannot take it. Just come over. Help me check it out. Please, Byron. I need my big brother." There was a pause. I could hear him thinking. I could hear him weighing the inconvenience against the guilt. "Okay," he said. "I am on my way. Give me 20 minutes. "Thanks," I said. "I will be waiting." I hung up the phone. I stared at the dark street. 20 minutes. 20 minutes until I looked my brother in the eye and watched his world burn. 20 minutes until I opened the box and unleashed the truth. I put the car in gear and drove toward the house where I grew up. The house that was not a home but a prison. The wind was still howling outside, but I did not feel the cold anymore. I was burning. I was Damon Dubois. And tonight, the Hill family was going to pay for their sins. The workshop sat behind the main house like a tomb made of cinder blocks and secrets. It was separated from the manicured lawn by a row of overgrown hedges that Walter Hill had planted 30 years ago. I pulled my rental car into the alley behind the structure and killed the headlights. The darkness of Detroit swallowed the vehicle instantly. The wind was still howling. It rattled the corrugated metal roof of the garage with a sound like dry bones shaking in a bag. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment and watched the digital clock on the dashboard change from 11:59 to midnight. The witching hour. The time when monsters come out to play. I looked at my hands. They were steady. They were wrapped around the cold steel of the crowbar I had taken from my own garage. I was not shaking anymore. The grief that had crippled me at the funeral was gone. It had been replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a blade in my mind. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of wet leaves and impending snow. I walked to the side door of the workshop. I had a key on my keychain. It was a key I had carried since I was 16 years old. A key to the sanctuary where my father taught me how to fix carburetors and rewire lamps. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth click. Walter kept everything well oiled. He was a man of maintenance. He maintained his machines, and he maintained his lies with equal precision. I stepped inside and flipped the switch. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered to life. They hummed with an angry electrical buzz. The light was harsh and green. It washed over the concrete floor and the rows of perfectly organized tools. I looked at the walls. Pegboards lined every inch of vertical space. Hammers, wrenches, saws, screwdrivers. They hung in size order. Their outlines were traced on the board in black marker so you would know exactly where they belonged. As a child, I thought this organization was a sign of discipline. I thought it was the mark of a craftsman. Now I saw it for what it was. It was the mark of a controller. It was the obsession of a man who needed to keep chaos at bay. The tools did not look like instruments of creation tonight. Under the flickering green light, they looked like instruments of torture. The pipe wrenches looked like bone crushers. The chisels looked like shivs. The smell hit me then. It was a thick, cloying mixture of sawdust and motor oil and old sweat. It was the smell of my childhood. It was the smell of the man who had stolen my life. I walked to the center of the room. There was a heavy wooden workbench there. It was scarred from decades of projects. I ran my hand over the rough wood. How many hours had I stood here holding a flashlight for him? How many times had he patted me on the shoulder and told me I was a good boy, a good project, a good experiment? I heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel in the alley. Byron was here. I gripped the crowbar tighter. I moved to the back of the workshop where the shadows were deepest. I needed to set the stage. I needed him to walk into the trap willingly. The door opened. A blast of cold wind swirled the sawdust on the floor. Byron stepped inside. He was wearing a cashmere coat over his silk pajamas. He had shoved his feet into expensive loafers without socks. He looked annoyed. He looked rich. He looked like a man whose sleep had been interrupted by a nuisance. "Dante," he called out. He squinted against the harsh light. "Where are you? It is freezing out here." "Over here," I said. My voice was low. Byron walked toward the workbench. He saw me standing in the shadows. He saw the hood of my sweatshirt pulled up over my head. He stopped. "What is going on?" he asked. He looked around the shop. "You said someone broke in. The door was locked. There is no one here." "Someone did break in," I said. I stepped into the light. "I broke in." Byron let out a sigh of exasperation. He rubbed his face with his manicured hands. "You are drunk," he said. "Go home, Dante. You are grieving. You are not making sense. I am not doing this with you tonight." He turned to leave. He reached for the door handle. "I know about the vasectomy," I said. The words stopped him cold. His hand froze on the brass knob. His back went rigid. The silence that filled the room was sudden and absolute. The humming of the lights seemed to get louder. Byron slowly turned around. His face was no longer annoyed. It was guarded. His eyes were narrow. He looked like a lawyer calculating his exposure. "What did you say?" he asked. His voice was careful. "I said I know." I repeated. I took a step toward him. "I know about the procedure in 1988. I know why I shoot blanks. I know why Alicia and I spent $50,000 on doctors who could not help us." Byron did not gasp. He did not look confused. He looked caught. "You are talking crazy," he said, but his eyes darted to the locked metal cabinet in the corner. The cabinet marked circuit breakers. I saw the look. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of panic. Alicia was right. He knew exactly where the bodies were buried. "Am I?" I asked. I lifted the crowbar. "Then help me look." Alicia said there is a box in the cabinet. She said it explains everything. If I am crazy, then let us open it and prove me wrong. If there is nothing in there but fuses and wires, then I will go to a mental hospital. But if she was right, then we are going to have a conversation. Byron stepped in front of me. He held up his hands. "Dante, put the bar down," he said. "You do not want to do this. That cabinet is full of high-voltage equipment. Pops told us never to touch it. It is dangerous." "Pops is a liar," I said, "and so are you." I shoved him. It was not a gentle push. I put all my weight into it. Byron stumbled backward and crashed into a stack of tires. He fell to the floor with a grunt. He looked up at me with shock. He had never seen me violent. He had never seen the wolf. "Stay down," I snarled. I turned to the cabinet. It was a gray industrial locker bolted to the wall. It had a heavy padlock on the hasp. A piece of masking tape across the front read, "High voltage, do not open." I jammed the flat end of the crowbar behind the padlock. I planted my feet. I thought about the needles Alicia stuck in her stomach. I thought about the empty nursery. I thought about the phantom ache in my groin. I pulled. The metal groaned. It was a screeching sound like a dying animal. I pulled harder. My muscles burned. I channeled every ounce of rage into my arms. Snap! The hasp broke. The lock fell to the concrete floor with a heavy clank. The door of the cabinet swung open. There were no wires inside. There were no circuit breakers. There was just a metal safe box sitting on the bottom shelf. It was fireproof. It was locked, but the key was hanging on a hook right next to it. Walter was arrogant. He thought no one would ever get past the first lock. I grabbed the key. I inserted it into the safe. I turned it. Byron was scrambling to his feet behind me. "Don't," he shouted. "Dante, do not open that box. You do not know what you are unleashing." "I am unleashing myself," I said. I threw the lid open. The contents of the box stared up at me under the green light. It was a time capsule of deception. On top lay a gun. It was a snub-nosed .38 Special. Beside it was a leather wallet. I opened the wallet. A gold badge gleamed back at me. United States Marshal. The photo ID showed a young Walter Hill, but the name printed below it was Roland Davies. I tossed the badge onto the workbench. It slid across the wood and stopped at Byron's feet. He stared at it. He did not look surprised. I reached back into the box. I pulled out a thick stack of files. They smelled of mildew and old paper. The top file was labeled Subject Damon Dubois, DOB 0512, 1985. My birthday, but not my name. I opened the file. A photograph was stapled to the first page. It showed a toddler. A little boy with wide eyes and curly hair holding a toy truck. It was me. But the background was not the suburban house I grew up in. It was a marble foyer with a grand staircase. It was a mansion. I flipped the page. There were court documents, termination of parental rights, witness protection placement agreement, and then the medical file. I pulled it out. My hands shook, but I forced them to be still. The header was from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Patient Damon Dubois. Age 3. Procedure bilateral vasectomy. Surgeon Dr. A. Phillips. Authorized by Roland Davies guardian ad litem. I read the notes. Procedure requested by federal prosecutors to prevent continuation of genetic lineage prone to sociopathic behavior. Genetic lineage. Sociopathic behavior. They talked about me like I was a dog with rabies. They talked about me like I was defective stock that needed to be culled. I turned around. I held the paper up. I shoved it into Byron's face. "Read it!" I screamed. My voice echoed off the metal walls. "Read it! Byron! Tell me what it says." Byron looked at the paper. He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. He did not reach for the document. He just stared at me with eyes that were wet with fear. "You knew," I said. It was not a question. "You knew the whole time." "Dante, listen," he started. "Don't call me Dante," I roared. I threw the stack of papers at him. They fluttered through the air like white birds and landed all over the dirty floor. "My name is Damon. I am the son of Marcus Dubois, and you knew. You watched me cry at Christmas because we had no kids to buy toys for. You watched Alicia destroy her body with hormones, and you knew I had been castrated by the man we call father." Byron took a step back. He hit the workbench. He had nowhere to go. "I had to," Byron said. His voice was trembling, but there was a defensive edge to it. "Pops told me when I turned 18. He showed me the files. He explained who you were." "Who I was?" I asked. "I was your little brother. I looked up to you." "No," Byron said. He shook his head. He was gaining confidence now. He was reciting the lies Walter had fed him. "You were a ticking time bomb. Your father was a monster Dante. He killed judges. He burned families alive. Pop said it was in the blood. He said the apple does not fall far from the tree. He said if you ever had sons, they would be just like him. He said he was saving the world from another generation of Dubois killers." "So you let him mutilate me," I said. I felt cold. "To save the world." "To save you," Byron shouted. "Look at you. You had a good life. You were a teacher. You were safe. If you knew who you were, you would have ended up dead or in prison just like the rest of them. We gave you a normal life." "You gave me a lie," I said. "You took $50,000 from him, Byron. I saw the bank transfer. You sold my manhood for a down payment on your house." Byron flinched. The truth struck him harder than my fist could have. "I have a family to protect," he whispered. "I have sons. I could not let you bring that darkness near them. I did what I had to do." "You are the darkness," I said. I looked at him and I felt nothing. No love, no brotherhood, just disgust. "You think you are the successful one, the architect, the golden boy, but you are just a whore who took money to keep a secret." "Dante, please," he said. He reached out a hand. "Do not touch me," I said. I stepped back. "And do not call me that name ever again." I looked down at the scattered papers. I saw the face of the toddler in the photo. He looked happy. He did not know that the men in suits were planning to end his line. He did not know that his own mother had traded him for freedom. He did not know that the brother he would grow up with was a paid actor. I bent down and scooped up the papers. I grabbed the gun. I grabbed the badge. I stuffed them all into the metal box. "Where are you going?" Byron asked. Panic was rising in his voice. "You cannot take that if Pops finds out." "Pops is done," I said. "I am going to the FBI. I am going to give them everything, the murder, the castration, the corruption. I am going to burn this whole life to the ground." "You can't," Byron pleaded. He grabbed my arm. "They will come for us, the syndicate. If they find out you are alive, if they find out Pops is here, they will kill us all. You are signing our death warrants." I looked at his hand on my arm. I looked into his eyes. I saw a coward. I saw a man who had built a castle on a foundation of bones. "Good," I said. I ripped my arm away. I turned and walked toward the door. "Dante, wait!" Byron screamed. "Think about the family!" I stopped at the threshold. I looked back at the green-lit workshop. I looked at the tools on the wall. I looked at the man I used to call brother shivering in his silk pajamas. I am thinking about the family, I said. I am thinking about the wife you people killed, and I am thinking about the son I never got to have. I stepped out into the cold night. The wind hit my face. It felt clean. It felt real. I walked to my car with the metal box under my arm. I did not look back. I started the engine and backed out of the alley. I left the lights on in the workshop. I left the door open. I wanted Walter to see it. I wanted him to wake up and see the empty cabinet. I wanted him to know that the experiment had failed. The sheep was gone. The wolf was loose. And he was hungry for justice. I was 3 steps away from the door when the darkness of the alley was blocked by a silhouette. It was a shape I knew better than my own reflection. It was broad at the shoulders and immovable as an oak tree. Walter Hill stood in the doorway. He was not wearing the flannel pajamas of a retiree. He was fully dressed in dark slacks and a heavy wool coat. His gray hair was combed back perfectly. Beside him stood my mother, Lorraine. She was clutching her purse with both hands. She looked small and terrified. She looked like a bird caught in a hurricane. But Walter did not look terrified. He looked disappointed. In his right hand he held a snub-nosed pistol. It was steady. It was pointed at the center of my chest. I stopped. The metal box was heavy under my arm. I felt the cold wind blowing in from behind them, but the temperature in the workshop seemed to drop 50 degrees. "Put the box down, Dante," Walter said. His voice was calm. It was the voice that had read me bedtime stories. It was the voice that had taught me how to tie a tie. But there was no warmth in it now. There was only command. I did not put the box down. I gripped it tighter. I looked at the gun. "You are going to shoot me?" I asked. "Is that how this ends, Pops? You kill the experiment because it got loose." Walter looked at me for a long second. Then he slowly lowered the gun. He clicked the safety on and slid it into his coat pocket. He stepped into the workshop. Lorraine followed him like a ghost. She refused to meet my eyes. "I am not going to shoot you," Walter said. He walked past me and stood next to the workbench. He looked down at Byron, who was still cowering against the tires. He looked at the broken lock on the cabinet. He shook his head. "I raised you better than this. Breaking and entering. Stealing federal property." "Federal property?" I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Is that what I am to you? Property? A file in a cabinet?" "You are my son," Lorraine whispered. She finally spoke. Her voice was thin and watery. "We love you, Dante. We did everything for you." "Stop it," I snapped. I looked at the woman who had bandaged my scraped knees, the woman who had sat in the front row at my college graduation. "Do not use that word. You are not my mother. You are a handler. You are a jailer." Lorraine flinched as if I had slapped her. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. Walter slammed his hand down on the workbench. The sound was like a gunshot. "That is enough," he commanded. He glared at me with eyes that were hard as flint. "Show some respect. That woman wiped your nose and fed you for 35 years. She sacrificed her own life to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" I screamed. I threw the metal box onto the workbench. It crashed down between us. "Safe from my own biology. Safe from the children I will never have because you cut me open like a lab rat." I expected him to deny it. I expected him to lie. But Walter Hill did not lie when the evidence was on the table. He stood taller. He squared his shoulders. He looked like the United States Marshal he truly was. "I saved you from the gutter," he said. His voice was low and intense. "Do you have any idea who your father was? Marcus Dubois was not a man. He was a rabid animal. He ordered the execution of 3 federal judges. He had a rival family burned alive in their beds, including 2 infants. He poisoned this city with heroin and violence. He was a monster, Dante, and monsters breed monsters." "So you decided to play God," I said. "You decided to end the line." "It was necessary," Walter said. He spoke with the absolute conviction of a fanatic. "The prosecutor wanted to put you in the system. He wanted to throw you to the wolves. I stepped in. I offered a solution. I told them I could take the boy. I told them I could raise him right. But I agreed that the risk was too high. The Dubois blood is poison. It is aggressive. It is violent. We could not take the chance that you would pass that genetic curse on to another generation. So yes, I authorized the procedure. I cut the poison out of the vine so the tree could grow straight. I looked at him with horror. He truly believed it. He did not see a mutilated child. He saw a successful mission. I am not a vine, I said. I am a human being. You let me marry a woman who wanted children more than anything in the world. You watched us suffer. You watched us spend every dime we had on doctors. You watched me hate myself because I thought I was broken. And you sat there in your recliner and said nothing. I gave you a life, Walter argued. He pointed a finger at me. Look at you. You are a teacher. You are a respected member of the community. You are gentle. You are kind. You are nothing like Marcus Dubois. And why is that? Because I made you that way. I molded you. I suppressed the violence. I saved you from becoming a killer. You made me a pet, I said. You made me a gelding. You stripped me of my manhood so you could feel safe. I did what had to be done, Walter said. He was not apologizing. He was doubling down. And I would do it again. A man does the hard things, Dante. A man makes the choices that allow others to sleep at night. You slept peacefully for 30 years because I carried the weight of the truth for you. And Alicia, I asked. The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Walter stopped. His face tightened. For the first time, the mask of righteous authority slipped. He looked away. He looked at the floor. Did you save her too? I asked. I stepped closer to him. I could smell his aftershave. It was the same Old Spice he had worn my whole life. It smelled like betrayal. Did you protect her the way you protected me? She was digging, Walter said quietly. I warned her. I told her to leave it alone. I begged her to stop asking questions. You killed her, I said. No, Walter said. He looked up. His eyes were wet now, but his jaw was set. I did not kill her, but I could not stop it. She started making calls. She contacted a lawyer in Chicago. She started pulling old court records. The syndicate has eyes everywhere, Dante, even now, even after 30 years. They have people in the clerk's office. They have people in the police department. When she flagged those files, she lit a flare in the dark. You are a marshal, I shouted. You could have saved her. You could have called in protection. And expose us all, Walter roared back. If I called it in, then the Dubois family would know exactly where we are. They would know that Marcus Dubois' son is alive and living in Detroit. They would have come for you. They would have come for Lorraine. They would have come for Byron and his boys. It was her or the family, Dante. I had to make a choice. So you let them kill her, I said. My voice broke. I let nature take its course, Walter said coldly. I received a phone call, a courtesy call from an old contact. They told me the problem would be handled. They told me it would look like an accident. They told me if I stayed out of it, then the rest of the family would remain off limits. I stared at him, the man I had idolized, the man I had tried to emulate. He had traded my wife's life for his own security. He had bartered her blood to keep his secrets buried. She was not the problem, I whispered. You were the problem. You and your lies. She was a liability, Walter said. He regained his composure. He was the handler again. She was going to destroy everything I built. She was going to destroy you. If she had released those files, you would be dead right now. I chose my son over my daughter-in-law. It is a tragedy, Dante. I grieve for her. But I saved you. You did not save me, I said. You destroyed me. I grabbed the metal box from the workbench. I held it to my chest. I am done, I said. I am done with your protection. I am done with your lies. I am taking this to the FBI. I am going to tell them everything about the castration, about the cover-up, about the murder. Walter stepped in front of me. He blocked the door. You cannot do that, he said. If you go to the FBI, you open Pandora's box. The syndicate will come for you. You will spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You will be hunted. Let them come, I said. I have nothing left to lose. You took my wife, you took my children, you took my name. What are they going to take from me, Pops? My life. I do not care about my life anymore. Dante, please, Lorraine sobbed. She reached out to grab my coat. Don't do this. We can run. We have money hidden. We can go to Mexico. We can start over. I pulled away from her touch. It felt like burning coal. You can run, I said. You are good at running. You are good at pretending. But I am staying. I am going to finish what Alicia started. I looked at Walter one last time. He looked old now. The authority was gone. He looked like a man standing in the ruins of his own kingdom. You said Marcus Dubois was a monster, I said. You said he was a devil. But at least he did not lie about what he was. You are worse than him. You are a devil who thinks he is a saint. I love you, son, Walter whispered. My name is Damon, I said, and I am not your son. I shoved past him. He did not try to stop me. He knew it was over. He knew that the wall he had built for 30 years had finally collapsed. I walked out into the night. The wind was still screaming. The cold air hit my face and dried the tears that were streaming down my cheeks. I walked to my car. I threw the box onto the passenger seat. I looked back at the workshop. The light was still spilling out of the open door. I saw Walter and Lorraine standing there, two silhouettes in the green glow. They looked small. They looked pathetic. I started the engine. I shifted the car into drive. I did not look back again. I drove toward the city. I drove toward the truth. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel empty. I felt full. I was full of rage. I was full of purpose. I was Damon Dubois, and I was coming for them all. The pistol was heavy in my hand. It was a Smith & Wesson .38 Special. The steel was cold against my sweating palm, but the handle felt warm where Walter had gripped it moments before. I stood in the center of the workshop with the green fluorescent light humming above me like a swarm of angry hornets. My father stood 5 feet away. My brother crouched by the tires. They were both watching the muzzle of the gun. They were waiting for the loud noise that would end their lives. I looked at the weapon. It was such a small machine. It was just a collection of springs and levers and firing pins. But in that moment, it felt like the only honest thing in the room. It did not lie. It did not keep secrets. It had one purpose, and it performed that purpose with absolute integrity. If I pulled the trigger, the hammer would fall, the primer would ignite, the bullet would fly. It was simple physics. It was cleaner than the tangled web of lies that Walter Hill had spun for 30 years. A voice in the back of my head began to whisper. It was not the voice of Dante Hill, the history teacher. It was not the voice of the man who graded papers and worried about student loans. It was a new voice. It was dark and ancient and hungry. Do it, the voice said. They deserve it. They stole your life. They cut you. They let your wife die. Put a bullet in his chest and watch the light go out. It is your right. It is in your blood. I felt a physical shift inside my body. My heart rate slowed down. The trembling in my hands stopped completely. My vision sharpened until I could see the individual pores on Walter's nose. I could see the pulse beating frantically in Byron's neck. I felt a surge of power that was intoxicating. This was the Dubois blood. This was the genetic legacy that the federal government was so afraid of. They had tried to cut it out of me with a scalpel, but they had failed. It was still there. It was waking up. I raised the gun. I leveled it at Walter's chest. He did not flinch. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and resignation. He knew what he had done. He knew that by the laws of the street he deserved to die. He had betrayed his own soldier. He had sacrificed his own family. Go ahead, Walter said softly. If that is who you are, then do it. Prove me right. Prove that you are Marcus Dubois's son. I tightened my finger on the trigger. The metal bit into my skin. It would be so easy. Just 4 pounds of pressure, a fraction of a second, and then the pain would stop. The rage would have an outlet. I could wipe the smug look of righteousness off his face forever. I imagined the sound. I imagined the recoil. I imagined the spray of red against the pegboard wall behind him. It felt good. That was the terrifying part. It felt right. I swung the barrel toward Byron. He let out a whimper and curled into a ball. The architect. The success story. The brother who took $50,000 to watch me suffer. I could end him too. I could erase his smugness. I could punish him for every time he told me to man up. I could punish him for every time he held his twin sons and looked at me with pity. Kill them all, the voice whispered. Burn the workshop down. Walk away into the night. You are a ghost. You are nobody. You can do anything. I looked back at Walter. He was closing his eyes. He was bracing himself. He was ready to accept his punishment. And that was when I saw it. I saw the relief on his face. He wanted me to shoot him. He wanted it to be over. If I killed him, he would die a martyr in his own mind. He would die believing he was right about me. He would die thinking he had sacrificed himself to stop a monster. Death was not a punishment for a man like Walter Hill. Death was an escape. It was a release from the guilt. It was a release from the fear of the syndicate finding him. If I pulled the trigger, I would be giving him exactly what he wanted. I would be validating every lie he ever told. I would be proving that I was just a violent animal that needed to be put down. I would be destroying Dante Hill and letting Damon Dubois win. I looked at the gun again. I thought about Alicia. I thought about the video. She did not tell me to kill them. She told me to finish it. She told me to get the truth. She died trying to use the law to save us. If I became a murderer now, I would be spitting on her sacrifice. I would be becoming the very thing she tried to save me from. The heat in my blood began to cool. The red haze lifted from my vision. The voice in my head screamed in protest, but I pushed it down. I was not Marcus Dubois. I was not a killer. I was a man who had been wronged, and I was going to get justice, not revenge. Justice. I took a deep breath. The air in the workshop smelled of gasoline and betrayal. I slowly lowered the gun. Part 5 continued. I uncocked the hammer. The click sounded loud in the silence. Walter opened his eyes. He looked confused. He looked at the gun hanging by my side, and then he looked up at my face. He was waiting for the explosion that never came. "You are not worth the bullet," I said. My voice was flat and cold. It was harder than any scream. "Dante," Walter whispered. He took a step forward. "Stay back," I commanded. I did not raise the voice, but the authority in it stopped him in his tracks. "I am not going to kill you, Pops. That would be too easy. You want to die. You want to be the victim. But I am not going to give you that satisfaction." I walked over to the workbench. I kept the gun in my right hand, but I used my left hand to grab the metal box. I shoved the files back inside. I grabbed the badge. I grabbed the photos. I closed the lid and locked it. "I am going to leave you alive," I said. "I am going to let you live with what you did. I am going to let you wake up every morning in this house and look at the empty chair where I used to sit. I am going to let you look at your wife and know that you destroyed the only son she ever really had." I turned to Byron. He was still on the floor. He looked pathetic. "And you," I said, "you get to live with the knowledge that you are a coward. You get to look at your sons and know that you bought their future by selling your brother's soul. Every time you look at them, you will see me. You will see the uncle they will never know." I tucked the box under my arm. I turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" Walter asked. His voice was rising in panic now. The resignation was gone. The fear was back. "I told you," I said. "I am going to the FBI. I am going to give them everything. The castration, the fraud, the murder. I am going to expose the witness protection program's dirty little secret. And then I am going to let the chips fall where they may." "No!" Walter screamed. He lunged toward me. "You cannot do that. If you expose us, the syndicate will find us. They will come for us, Dante. They will torture us. They will kill Lorraine. They will kill Byron's kids." I stopped at the door. I looked back at him. "Then you better run," I said. "Dante, please," Walter begged. He fell to his knees. The proud United States Marshal was gone. There was only a desperate old man on the concrete floor. They never forget. They never forgive. If you go to the authorities, you are signing our death warrant. You are signing your own death warrant. "I am already dead," I said. "Dante Hill died the day you cut him open. Damon Dubois died the day you stole him. There is no one left to kill." "Think about your mother," Walter sobbed. Tears were streaming down his face. "Think about Lorraine." "Lorraine is packing a suitcase right now," I said. "She is smarter than you. She knows it is over." "I did it for you," Walter wailed. "I did it all for you." "No," I said. "You did it for yourself. You did it because you were afraid. And now you are going to know what it feels like to be truly afraid. You are going to know what it feels like to look over your shoulder every second of every day. Welcome to my world, Pops." I stepped out into the night. The wind hit me again. It felt like a cleansing rain. I walked to my rental car. I tossed the metal box onto the passenger seat. I tossed the gun in next to it. Behind me, I could hear Walter screaming my name. It was a ragged, desperate sound. It sounded like a ghost howling in a graveyard. I got into the car. I locked the doors. I looked through the window at the workshop. Walter had crawled to the doorway. He was reaching out toward me. His face was twisted in agony. I started the engine. I did not feel sad. I did not feel happy. I felt light. The weight of the secret was gone. The weight of the lie was gone. I was free. I put the car in drive and peeled out of the alley. The tires spun on the loose gravel before catching the pavement. I sped down the dark street, leaving the house and the workshop and the family behind. I watched them disappear in my rearview mirror. A small box of light in a world of darkness. I turned onto the main avenue. The streetlights blurred into streaks of amber. I was heading downtown. I was heading to the Federal Building. But then I saw the headlights. A pair of bright xenon lights appeared in my rearview mirror. They were high off the ground. An SUV. It was moving fast, much faster than the speed limit. I changed lanes. The lights changed lanes with me. I took a sudden right turn onto a side street. The lights followed. My heart hammered against my ribs. Walter said the syndicate had eyes everywhere. He said they knew Alicia was digging. Had they been watching the house? Had they been waiting for me to leave? The SUV accelerated. It was a black Chevrolet Suburban. It looked like a battering ram on wheels. It was closing the distance. I gripped the steering wheel. I was driving a cheap rental sedan, a Toyota Camry. It was not built for a chase. But I was not Dante Hill, the careful driver, anymore. I was Damon Dubois. And something in my blood knew exactly what to do. I slammed on the gas. The little engine whined in protest, but the car surged forward. I blew through a stop sign at 40 miles an hour. The SUV was right on my bumper. I could see the grill filling my rear window. I needed to lose them. I needed to get to the highway. I took a sharp left turn. The tires screamed. The back end of the car slid out. I steered into the skid instinctively. My hands moved on the wheel with a precision I had never learned in driver's education. It felt natural. It felt like I had done this 1,000 times before. Was this the genetic memory Walter talked about? Was this the skill of a getaway driver passed down through DNA? The SUV took the corner wide. It smashed into a parked car, sending glass spraying across the street. But it kept coming. It was heavy and powerful. I saw an alleyway coming up on my right. It was narrow, too narrow for the Suburban. I slammed on the brakes and ripped the wheel to the right. The Camry drifted sideways. I threaded the needle. The side mirrors scraped against the brick walls of the buildings on either side, but I made it through. I looked in the mirror. The SUV slammed on its brakes, but it was too late. It skidded past the alley entrance. I punched the gas. I flew down the alley, bouncing over potholes and garbage bags. I burst out onto the next street. I took a left, then a right, then another left. I wove through the grid of Detroit streets like a rat in a maze. I checked the mirror. The street behind me was empty. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was from adrenaline, not fear. I had escaped. I had outrun the wolves. I merged onto the Lodge Freeway. The city skyline rose up ahead of me. It was lit up in gold and purple. It looked beautiful and dangerous, just like the truth. 10 minutes later, I pulled up to the Patrick V. McNamara Federal Building on Michigan Avenue. It was a fortress of concrete and glass. It looked impenetrable. I parked the car right in front of the main entrance. It was a no parking zone. I did not care. I grabbed the metal box. I grabbed the gun. I walked up the steps. The security guard at the front desk looked up. He was a young man. He looked bored. He saw the disheveled man in the torn hoodie. He saw the metal box. And then he saw the gun in my hand. His eyes went wide. He reached for his radio. He reached for his weapon. "Don't," I said. I stopped 10 feet away from him. I slowly placed the gun on the marble floor. I kicked it toward him. "I am not here to hurt anyone." I walked to the desk. I placed the metal box on the counter. My hands were covered in grease and sweat. I smelled like oil and fear. "Can I help you, sir?" the guard asked. His voice was shaking. He had his gun drawn now. He was pointing it at me. I looked him in the eye. I felt a strange sense of calm. "My name is Dante Hill," I said. "But the file inside this box says my name is Damon Dubois. I want to speak to the agent in charge. I want to report a murder. I want to report a kidnapping. And I want to report a criminal conspiracy within the United States Marshal Service." The guard looked at me. He looked at the box. He looked at the gun on the floor. "Sir," he said, "put your hands on your head." I raised my hands. I interlaced my fingers behind my neck. "Call them," I said. "Call them all. Tell them the experiment is over." The guard picked up his radio. As he spoke into it, I looked out the glass doors at the dark city. Somewhere out there, Walter and Lorraine were running. Somewhere out there, the syndicate was waking up. My life as I knew it was over. I was going to prison, or I was going to witness protection, or I was going to the morgue. But for the first time in 38 years, I knew exactly who I was. I was the man who burned the lie down. The interrogation room at the federal building was painted a color that did not exist in nature. It was a pale, sickly green that smelled of ammonia and fear. I sat at a metal table for 12 hours while a rotating cast of agents came and went. I told them everything. I told them about the workshop. I told them about the medical records. I told them about the castration of a 3-year-old boy. I told them about the murder of my wife. They listened with stone faces. They recorded every word. When I handed over the metal box from Walter's workshop, the mood in the room shifted. The senior agent, a woman named Petrosky with steel gray hair, opened the files. Her eyes widened as she read the surgical logs. She looked at me not as a suspect, but as a ghost. I was a man who was not supposed to exist. I was a loose end that had been tied off 30 years ago, and now I was unraveling the entire tapestry of their department. The investigation that followed was swift and brutal. It tore through the lies of my life like a tornado. Within 48 hours, the FBI forensics team had examined the wreckage of Alicia's car. The local police had ruled it an accident caused by a stray dog. But the federal team found the truth. The brake line had been severed. It was a clean cut made with a serrated blade. There were traces of a chemical accelerant on the tires. It was not an accident. It was an execution. When Agent Petrosky told me the news, I did not cry. I sat in the safe house they had moved me to, and I stared at the wall. I felt a cold, grim satisfaction. I was not crazy. Alicia was not careless. She was murdered because she got too close to the truth. The validation did not bring her back, but it silenced the voice of doubt in my head. The raid on my parents' house happened at dawn on the 3rd day. I was not there, but Agent Petrosky showed me the report. The tactical team kicked down the door of the ranch house on Elm Street, ready to arrest a rogue United States Marshal. They found nothing. The house was empty. The coffee pot in the kitchen was still warm. The television was playing the morning news on mute. But Walter and Lorraine were gone. They had fled in the night. They had activated one of the many escape routes Walter had spent a lifetime preparing. They left behind their furniture, and their photos, and their false identities. They vanished into the underworld of ghosts and fugitives. Walter Hill was now running from the very law he had sworn to uphold, and he was running from something much worse. News of the investigation had leaked. The files Alicia uncovered were now part of a sealed federal indictment, but secrets have a way of bleeding out in Detroit. The Dubois syndicate was still active. It was different now. It was corporate. It was quieter. But the memory of the family was long. Word got out that the man who testified against Marcus Dubois was still alive. Word got out that the son of the king had been stolen and mutilated. The hunters became the hunted. Walter and Lorraine were out there somewhere, living in cheap motels and looking over their shoulders at every shadow. They were living the nightmare they had forced upon me. Byron did not escape. He was too attached to his comfort to run. He was arrested at his architecture firm in downtown Detroit. They charged him with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud. The FBI froze his assets. They seized his house. They seized his bank accounts, including the $50,000 he had taken as a bribe to sell his brother. His life collapsed in an afternoon. His wife left him and took the twins. His partners voted him out of the firm. He was released on bail pending trial, but he was a ruined man. 2 weeks after the raid, my burner phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I knew it was him. I answered, but I did not speak. "Dante." Byron's voice was jagged. He sounded drunk. "Please, man, you have to help me. They took everything. I am sleeping on a friend's couch. I have no money for a lawyer." I listened to his breathing. I listened to the desperation of a man who had never known hardship. "We are brothers," Byron sobbed. "Doesn't that mean anything? I made a mistake. I was scared of Pops. I am sorry. Please, Dante, call Agent Petrosky. Tell them I was coerced. Tell them I am a victim too." I thought about the medical records. I thought about the way he looked at his sons with that smug pride while I sat alone in the corner. I thought about Alicia lying in a casket because he was too cowardly to warn us. You are not a victim, I said. You are an accomplice. Dante, please, he begged. I am your family. My family is dead, I said. I hung up the phone. I took the battery out. I walked to the window of the safe house and threw the pieces into the dumpster in the alley. I felt lighter. I had cut the last cord. The cancer was gone. 3 weeks later, I sat in a conference room with Agent Petrowski and a man from the witness security program. The man was wearing a tailored suit, and he had a folder in front of him. Mr. Hill, the man said. He corrected himself. Mr. Dubois, we have a situation. The leak regarding your identity is substantial. The syndicate knows you are alive. They know you are the biological son of Marcus Dubois. There are factions within the organization that might want to recruit you. There are others that might want to kill you to finish the job your father started. He slid a packet of papers across the table. We are offering you a full relocation package, he said. New identity, new history. We can move you to Arizona or perhaps Montana. We will arrange for facial reconstruction surgery to alter your appearance. It will be a fresh start. You can be anyone you want. I looked at the papers. I looked at the photos of potential new faces, noses that were straighter, jaws that were softer. They were offering to erase me again. They wanted to finish what Walter started. They wanted to bury the mistake. No, I said. The man blinked. Excuse me. I said no, I repeated. I pushed the papers back. I am not running. I have spent 38 years running from a truth I did not know existed. I am done hiding. You do not understand the danger, Agent Petrowski said. Her voice was gentle but firm. These people are violent. If you stay in the open, you are a target. I am not staying in Detroit, I said, but I am not changing my face, and I am not changing my name to something you chose out of a phone book. Your name is a liability, the man said. Damon Dubois is a target. I am not Damon Dubois, I said. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray city one last time. I saw the streets where I learned to ride a bike. I saw the skyline where I kissed my wife for the first time. It was all built on lies, but the man who lived it was real. The pain was real. The love was real. My name is Dante Hill, I said. Walter Hill was a liar and a criminal. But the name Hill does not belong to him. It belongs to the man I became. It belongs to the teacher who stayed up late grading papers. It belongs to the husband who loved Alicia. I earned that name. I paid for it with my own flesh and blood. I turned back to them. I will leave Detroit, I said. I will go west, far west. But I go as myself. I will not have surgery. I will not hide in the shadows. If the Dubois family wants to find me, let them come. I have nothing left for them to take. I am not afraid of ghosts anymore. Agent Petrowski looked at me for a long time. She saw something in my eyes that made her close the folder. She saw the resolution of a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side made of steel. Okay, she said. We will help you relocate, as Dante Hill. I walked out of that building as a free man. I was legally reclaiming the name that had been given to me as a cover. But it was no longer a cover. It was a badge of honor. I was not the son of a mobster. I was not the son of a marshal. I was my own creation. 1 year later. The rain in Portland was different than the rain in Detroit. It was softer. It was a mist that blanketed the world in green and gray. I stood on the balcony of my apartment on the west side of the city. The view was spectacular. To the east, the white peak of Mount Hood rose above the clouds like a sentinel. It was a dormant volcano, silent but powerful. I felt a kinship with that mountain. My apartment was small. It had 1 bedroom and a living room filled with books. The walls were freshly painted. I had spent a week finding the exact shade. Ocean mist. It was a pale blue with hints of gray and green. It was the color Alicia had fought for. It was the color of the guest room she never got to finish. Now it surrounded me. It felt like she was hugging me. I drank my coffee and watched the clouds move over the city. My life was quiet now. I taught history at a small high school in the suburbs. My students called me Mr. Hill. They knew me as the teacher who was tough on grading, but who would stay late to help them understand the causes of the Civil War. They knew me as the coach who took over the junior varsity basketball team and taught them that defense was more important than glory. They did not know that their teacher was the subject of a sealed federal file. They did not know that he had faced down a United States Marshal in a workshop filled with tools. They did not know that he had been sterilized at age 3 to save the world from his genes. And they did not need to know. Sometimes late at night I would wake up sweating. I would hear the phantom sound of a black SUV tires screeching on pavement. I would reach for the gun I kept in the nightstand safe, but those moments were becoming fewer. I had made peace with my emptiness. I would never have biological children. The line of Marcus Dubois ended with me. Walter had won that battle, but he had lost the war. Because I was a father in every way that mattered. I had 150 children. They walked into my classroom every day. I taught them about history so they would not repeat it. I taught them about integrity. I taught them that a man is defined by his actions, not his lineage. I watched them grow. I watched them succeed. I thought about Alicia every day. I kept her photo on my desk at school. It was the one from our wedding where she was laughing. She had died to give me this view. She had died so I could stand on this balcony and breathe air that was not poisoned by lies. She had saved me. I finished my coffee. It was time to go to work. I had a lesson plan to prepare. We were studying the Reconstruction era. We were studying how a nation rebuilds itself after it has been torn apart by war. It was my favorite subject. I put on my coat. I checked my reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at me was older. There were lines around the eyes. There was gray in the beard. But the eyes were clear. They were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a survivor. I walked out the door and locked it behind me. I was alone. But I was not lonely. I carried the truth with me like a shield. Living well was the best revenge, and I was living. Lesson learned. My life taught me that the heaviest chains aren't made of iron. They are forged from the lies we are told by those we trust. I spent decades mourning a barrenness that wasn't my fault, living a script written by a father who feared my blood more than he loved my soul. But in the end, biology is not destiny. Character is. Alicia didn't die for Damon Dubois, the mobster's son. She died for Dante Hill, the man she loved. True freedom isn't about hiding from your past. It's about standing in the light of your own truth, no matter how much it burns.